Do you know what your spring equalizer should look like when it's in good working, safe condition? Well, if you don't, hopefully today we can teach you how to spot a good equalizer. That way you can identify a bad equalizer when you're doing your maintenance and your walk around. When it comes to spring suspension equalizers, there's many shapes and sizes depending on manufacturer, year model, and size of axle that you have. A common question and comment that we get is, when do I replace my equalizers and how long should they last? I don't have an answer to that question. It really depends on how often you use it, how often you maintain your trailer, if you're overloading, if you're in rough road conditions, and mileage. So the answer to that would be broad and really unanswerable in my opinion. But these parts do wear out. They do have to be replaced from time to time. So what we're going to do today is help you identify what one should look like. It's like in the banking industry. If you're going to learn how to identify counterfeit money, they're going to teach you what real money looks like and feels like in order to identify the counterfeit or if there's something wrong. The same can be said on many of your trailer components. If you know what it looks like in good working condition, then you should be able to spot it if it's not in good working condition. I see a lot of times with companies that have fleet vehicles, they'll have 5 or 6 vehicles that are all worn out. Well, they all look good to me because they all look the same, when really they all need to be repaired and have some components replaced on them. The biggest thing and the biggest piece of advice I can tell you on a trailer, it's my secret. I'm going to give you my secret today. People lie. If you've ever lied, whether it's a little white lie or a big whatever other color lie, raise your hand. I haven't lied since the last time. But trailers never lie or very seldom lie. And this is what I mean by that. If you bring a trailer in and you say, my lights were working fine while I got on the road this morning, and then when I look at the trailer, every wire is broke off, disconnected, the plug's been rusted out forever, and you can tell the lights hadn't worked in years. If you come in and say, hey, I think I got something going on with my trailer, and I look at it and say, has it ever been overloaded? Absolutely not. I carry no weight on it. And both axles are bent, bowed, the suspension's worn out. That tells me that the trailer's been abused or been overloaded. Just tell the truth on it. It's always going to help your mechanic or your service tech know what he's looking for. Just admit it or blame it on your brother-in-law. So the trailer is going to talk to you, but you got to listen. The trailer's going to show you when it needs some help or needs repair, but you got to look at it. It's your responsibility. Don't act like it's a surprise when your tires are worn out and you haven't checked the air pressure in them in a year or two, or if your spring suspension is worn out because you've never put hands on it. So today we're going to show you what a good suspension should look like in order to help you determine if it's bad or not. And then we'll show you a couple mock-ups of what you can look for the difference would be. We're going to look at a 7K style equalizer. This will be used anywhere from 5200 up to 8K. It's a very common equalizer on your medium and heavy duty trailers, and they go up in size from there, and we'll talk about those shortly. So let me grab a flashlight. So to check your equalizer out, I'm going to recommend that you get a good level service and you try to get your trailer as level as possible. So if you have it hooked up to your truck, unless you're perfectly level on your hitch, you may need to unhook it to take a look at this. And we are going to first look visually at the equalizer here. That's the center bolt. Sometimes they come with a grease zert that never gets greased, and sometimes they come without a grease zert that never gets greased. So they're kind of both the same, just one has a grease zert and the other one does not. The area that wears out the fastest is right here. I'm going to try to see if I can point to it. So where that spring rides inside the box of the equalizer, it should not be contacting the underside of the top. There should be a gap. And we'll pull the camera down a little bit. I'm going to see if I can get a little better angle on that. So right there, you can see the spring is inside the equalizer, but it is not touching the top. There is a little gap there. And the reason being, there is a wear bar inside here that spring rides on. That's usually the first thing that wears out. And this is that wear bar. So this is for any type of slipper setup, you're going to have a wear bar or a roller. And I'll show you a roller here in a minute. But that spring is going to ride like this. That spring comes in and out like that. So if the spring is up here, it's just rubbing the underside of this. You've lost that distance in suspension travel, and it's just not going to work right. It will work for a time, but what will eventually happen, it will crack out the top of this. This will fold up, and you will lose the suspension on that front axle, and it's going to transfer most of the weight to the rear axle, depending on how you're hauling, and it's going to be a rough ride, and it can damage other components. It can actually even cause axle bending. So this is usually what wears out. I do see some people, when this wears out, cut this out and put a piece of solid material in here. I'm not a fan of that. It will make it last longer, but it will just keep wearing and wearing and wearing, and you'll have it in your mind, well, it's a solid piece and it's going to wear through. Well, if it's solid, even when it gets here, it's still going to be wearing. It's going to probably wear the spring out at that point, and it's going to need to be replaced, and you're going to forget about it. I prefer not to rebuild these unless you just can't find one. They're pretty inexpensive. They're really easy to find because, like I said, on a medium duty trailer and up, this is probably the most common Equalizer for 5200 all the way through 8 and even some 9K stuff. So let's take a look at the second spot. We'll take a front view of the Equalizer here. See if we can just get a straight on shot of that. So if you'll notice the gap in between here and there, and we talk about that when loading your trailer, how you want that gap to be pretty much the same or a little high in the front for your preload. If there is no gap, and this can change, so if you have a longer center hanger, this may have a little more distance, but most of them are going to have this distance right here. But if this Equalizer were to be closer to the frame, and I will tell you, sometimes we see it all the way against the frame, it is beyond wore out. And that doesn't happen overnight. That takes lots and lots of miles or lots of years of use to achieve that, but we see them do that. And you want to make sure you have a gap on both sides and make sure that it's not riding up against the frame, because once you do that, it's not equalizing suspension. You basically just have two rigid axles that are using the tire and a little bit of spring left. And I'll show you on the new Equalizer. So you can imagine your bolt in there. As it wears, the bolt will actually cut all the way through the Equalizer, and then this will ride on top of the frame. And the bolt won't come out because it usually hits the frame. Now, every once in a while, we will see this right here when the bolt wears through. It will actually cut the bolt almost in half. But make sure you have that gap, and make sure on that front spring you have that gap where the front axle is riding on that slipper. If you're not sure, if you can't tell, then you may need to take a tire off, and we'll go look at the other side. I have a tire pulled off the other side just so you can see that, but I wanted you to be able to see it if you're just doing a daily walk around, because I don't expect you to go pull your tire off to do your walk around and check your suspension out. So let's go look at on the other side. You may be able to get a little better view. So here I have the tire off just so you can see it with the tire off, but you really need to be able to identify this with your tire on, but you can see that gap. I don't know if you can see the wear bar in there or not. It's hard to get in there with the camera. But if there is no gap, if this is all the way to the underside of that Equalizer needs to be replaced, and you really need to take a look at the spring to see if the spring is worn. If the spring is worn, it will have some cupping in the top of the spring, and you need to replace it at that time. So we'll come back up here to the top, and I'll show you a couple of Equalizers that run similar to the same scenario, but the parts are a little different in them. So this is the wear bar. This would be like for a Dexter 10K general duty setup. Some of the older ones will have, piece of pipe in there. They may have a little thicker bar. But if that's missing, the spring on this one will be all the way to the top as well. And you can imagine you've lost suspension from here to there. It's almost 3 inches that you've lost in your travel on that. I do see people cut this out. If the rest of the Equalizer is in good shape, cut it out and re-roll a piece on there. That's up to you if you want to do that. From a labor standpoint, for us, it's just as cheap for us just to replace the Equalizer, and usually it's worn in other areas, and I'll show you those next. We'll come here to the side. So this rubber bushing here, it will wear out as well. We do rebush springs from time to time, but rarely ever, if maybe never, replace bushings in this size Equalizer or the 7K, because usually if this is worn completely out, the rest of the Equalizer has been gone for some time. The spring eye holes will be cut all the way through, and we're going to talk about that next. But usually if it needs this, we're just going to replace the whole Equalizer just like we would with the wear bar, because we don't want to gamble it. So now we're going to look at one. This would be a setup you would see on a Alco, Hayes, quality running gear. You're not seeing them as much anymore. Same principle, but you can see it's shaped different. This one has a roller in the front, and you may think, man, that's going to last a lot longer. I will tell you, I replace as many of these as we do of these. Usually it will stop rolling, and that pressure from that will end up just shearing off this pin the roller will lose, and then the spring will come all the way to the top. See it just as much as any of the rest of them. So I don't think this design's any better. Maybe if it had a true bearing that was greasable or something in there, but that's only going to roll for so long, and it's going to give it up. One of the other places that wears, and this one is going to be hard to see, let's do it on this one here, is where the spring eye bolts come through. So it will actually wear and cause that to be sloppy. Really, the only way you can tell that, if it's severe, you can see some gapping underneath it. But really, the only way to do that, and we recommend, annually pull your spring bolts out to check the condition. If you have some wear in here, we see some people weld that up and then grind it out or replace it at that time. But again, we would not repair this unless the parts were not available. There was a time during that special time in our country a few years ago where you couldn't get nothing, that we were having to repair these. We were actually having to weld in new centers, put new bushings, new wear bars, and even forming some of these ourselves because you just couldn't get any. That's not the case right now. You can get them online. We'll try to leave a link in the description because this is very common. But just don't chance it. When it gets worn out, just replace it, because the worst you could do is a bolt break or the spring come off or the equalizer shear off, and you're going to lose your suspension. Your axle could track funny and cause you to bend the axle. So a $30 to $50 part may cost you $500 to $1,000 axle when it's really just a maintenance issue, and just don't do it over something silly like that. So in the smaller equalizers, they're a little harder to tell, but I'm going to mock this one up with a hanger. So if you can imagine, this is what the equalizer would look like off the vehicle. This is what it would look like on the vehicle. When these wear out, it will do the same thing. The bolt will cut all the way through, and this equalizer will actually come up way inside here. So you still have gap, but that's what you need to know. You see these 3 points, whether it's this size or this size, if the top of that is not lined up with that hole, and that's something you can look at from the front, if it's up here like that, then you've got to replace the equalizer, and likely you're going to have to replace the hanger at that point, or repair the hanger. These do wear out a lot, even though this is usually, we do see these even on 6 and 7K axles. The best way to have is slipper suspension, but some trailer manufacturers will put this on their heavy duty axles. Most of the time, this is going to be for 3,500 pound, or maybe 5,200 pound and down. The other places these will wear out are the bushings that go in there, and you can replace these. So if you're doing your annual and it's just the bushing is worn, and it's always going to wear usually at one side quicker than the other, the one that's got the pressure on it. So this will be the replacement. This is actually a longer one. This is a spring bushing that goes in a slipper. This is a wider spring, but it's the same principle. They make one for this size, and you just drive that out and drive that one back in. But if this is sloppy in there, just replace the equalizer on that. Again, pretty easy to find, and I say that loosely. It really depends on what part of the country, and we've had some parts here lately that are normally easy to find, but they've been a little bit of a challenge here lately. Do your annual, check your bolts, check your bushings, but when you're doing your walk around, just make sure, if this thing is riding the frame, if it's like that, it shouldn't be level, even though that looks good, like, hey, that's a good fit, yeah. But this isn't equalizing the load on your axle as it should. The same thing would be on the big bad boy back here too. This one even has a stop in it to keep it from bottoming completely out. But even on that one, you lose suspension, and it's going to hit the frame, and it's not going to do its job. This is a very overlooked component, very neglected component of the trailer. But let's just face it, most components of a trailer are neglected, from tires to couplers to whatever. And I think it's because we're making a living with them. It's hard to stop. We get it. It's hard to stop and get it fixed. It may be for finance reasons. It can be expensive if you let it go. If you'll do your homework, if you'll do a walk around, you may catch it before it costs you big money. And it may just cost you a few dollars today, but it may cost you some big dollars down the road. But keep an eye on your spring suspension. Check out your springs. I think we have a few videos that talk about changing out some of these components. We'll try to leave a link in the description. Any of these parts I can find online, we'll try to leave those as well. Leave us some comments if you've had any issues with your suspension. Maybe if you have a picture of one that's went forever and you're like, holy moly, I can't believe it. I've got one around here somewhere of one that cut all the way through, but I can't find it. It's tucked away somewhere. I'll find it after we shoot this video. But keep an eye on your suspension as well as every other part of the trailer. Remember, the trailer doesn't lie. It's trying to tell you that, hey, I need a little assistance. I need some help. I need some rebuilding. And with all that, we will see you down the road.